Farming Sunday is brought to you in association with Farmers Weekly, working for your farming future. Coming up on Farming Sunday.
Here at the Dairy Event and Livestock Show, planning for the winter is right at the top of the agenda, mainly because of the shortage of this stuff: straw.
Using this new SCR system, which is the treatment of the exhaust gases after they leave the engine, that means that we're able to publicly publish a 5% fuel saving versus alternative emissions control technologies.
The farm we're on now, he doesn't buy fertiliser. He probably buys a little bit just to top up on various areas we haven't got quite enough muck. But he'll inject everything, bit of muck he's got, and makes a huge saving.
No one can have failed to notice the appalling weather this summer. But while the arable farmers and problems with harvest have stolen the headlines, the implications for the livestock sector could be equally serious. Here at the Dairy Event and Livestock Show, planning for the winter is right at the top of the agenda, mainly because of the shortage of this stuff: straw. Whether it's in the ration or for bedding, cereal straw is central to dairy and beef farmers' plans for the winter. And with some reports suggesting straw availability is 50% down on normal, it's becoming a serious issue.
This is one of the worst years we've had for quite some time. I can't remember in the last 10, 12 years having any trouble getting straw. Some years it's more expensive than others, but quota supply has not been a problem, an issue in the past.
But this year,
this year it is, yes.
I think the quantity of straw will probably be okay for the winter. The quality will be really poor, but we'll have enough volume.
And if it is poor quality, then what are farmers going to have to do? Presumably...
Well, if they're using straw as feed, they'll have to buy more concentrates in to supplement it. If they're using it as bedding, then they're going to have some dusty yards, unfortunately, but that's how the season has turned out this year.
And have you got enough on your farm?
No, we're short.
Oh, it's probably the worst year we've ever had with straw, I think. Yeah. I mean, it's given me a shake. I think what we'll do is we'll look at other systems. I think we'll look at outwintering more, and so on and so forth, perhaps even growing kale or stubble turnips or something like that, just to push the summer out and squeeze the winter down to as little as we can get, you know.
Yeah. And is that
it's a huge cost. You know.
Is that a longer term plan, or is it...
Yeah, it's a long term plan. I mean, obviously you can't do that this year, but you know, next year and future years, I think that's what we've got to look at doing.
It's clear that farmers have got a problem with shortage of straw, but how serious a problem is it really?
Oh, the shortage of straw situation this year is very serious now. The weather conditions have been appalling. The problem for the farmers with that is that they have to get the next crop of grain in, and that is a priority to them rather than gathering the straw and selling it off the field, because that slows down the process of getting the next crop in. So it's more likely those farmers are going to decide to chop the straw and get the land turned back over and reseeded. So that leaves the bedding market very short of material. The alternatives, if you're not using straw for bedding, is all the wood byproducts that you can get: sawdust, shavings, wood chip, and then you move on to paper materials. There is one called EnviroBed, which is dried paper mill fibre, and then there's wetter materials, also out of the paper industry, and sand. Sand is a choice for farmers who have a deep bed cubicle situation. It is difficult to handle in slurry lagoons, but that's about the choice of bedding now, if you take out straw as a possibility. I believe we are going to see a shortage of bedding materials going on into subsequent years. The building industry is slowing down now, therefore less wood is being used in the building industry, which means there's less bedding materials. In addition to that, the outlet of using wood byproducts for incineration to make power is also a big outlet, and a lot of the wood is actually going into that stream now, which takes it away from the farming industry.
Keith Cutler is a vet in the southwest of England and also Farmers Weekly's Livestock Advisor of the Year. Keith, we know that it's been incredibly wet there out in the fields. What are the key issues for farmers with it being wet underfoot or having wet grass? What do they need to look out for?
There's several problems. Nutrition's a problem. There's lots of grass available, but quality is poor, so we're having to use buffer feeding. We're seeing probably a little bit more lameness than usual, with the feet being constantly wet. And we're certainly seeing more mastitis than usual, particularly strep uberis mastitis is causing a problem. And in young stock, again, we're getting higher levels of parasites, worms. Lungworm in particular is coming through earlier than usual, and we're seeing increased incidence of liver fluke.
And one of the things we've been hearing at the dairy event today is the problems of the shortage of straw. If farmers have got a shortage of straw, or indeed they've got straw which is pretty poor quality that they're going to have to use this winter, what are the problems that presents and what should they be doing about it?
Perhaps they need to be looking at alternatives for bedding their cubicles, if that's a possibility, looking at perhaps wood chips or dry paper waste or some other alternative if it's viable to them.
And does bad quality straw actually present sort of health and welfare issues for the livestock?
Yes, it does, and the cubicle management or straw yard management is much worse, but also foursy straw, moulds, that's just not good for the cows in general, and some of the fungi can even cause cows to abort, so we need to watch out for things like that.
Straw is a central component of the feed ration, but now dairy and beef farmers may be forced into finding alternatives. So what are the options?
One of the major benefits of straw in the diet is that it actually slows down the rate of passage of feed and therefore actually generally dries up the dung. So inadvertently, although you could be saving on feeding straw, bedding requirement could rise quite dramatically by leaving it out. And equally with dry dairy cows, for example, where straw can be a very, very effective forage base in terms of reducing energy density and correcting mineral imbalances. A dry dairy cow, for example, would use approximately 1/4 of a tonne of straw. So even with a £20 a tonne increase in straw cost, it equates to £5 a cow. Removing that from the diet could lead to the requirement for a more expensive mineral, a decab mineral possibly to balance the grass silage, which could easily cost £10 to £15 a cow. So it's important to look at it in its entirety and look at the overall diet and the likely knock-on effects.
While straw in the ration is one issue for farmers, David Barker at Optivite says that farmers also need to consider the feed values of wheat and other crops.
Well, not only is straw an issue, but there certainly could be issues with wheat and its feed value, particularly if it's fed above 15% moisture content. If it's fed, say, at 20%, you could easily lose a megajoule, and therefore you should allow for that when you're actually doing your rations for feeding this winter. Sprouting can be a problem. Certainly if you had a sample that had at least 10% sprouting, you've lost at least 1% of the energy. But not only the energy, you can lose protein content, mineral content and vitamin content.
The next few weeks for livestock farmers are going to be crucial. Will they be able to get hold of enough straw, and at what quality? Only time will tell, but one thing's for sure, they're going to have to plan for a winter of new challenges for bedding and feed.
This is the largest conventional wheeled tractor that Massey Ferguson has ever made. It's 370 horsepower and it's aimed firmly at the larger farmers, the agri-businesses, some big contractors, etc. It's not, as you can see, a typical runaround tractor that you'd find in the smaller farm.
What things drive the design and the manufacture of a tractor like this one?
Well, farmers are increasingly, of course, looking to control costs. That means two things. It means that they want tractors which are reliable, low cost of ownership, etc. But secondly, tractors that are highly productive, because the more work that we can do in a day with a tractor, the better. That's why tractors have been getting more powerful recently. One driver can be used to drive a 370 horsepower tractor rather than 2 drivers driving 185 horsepower tractors, and that effectively means more work done in the day. The second thing driving tractor design is the driver and the cab comfort, the ergonomics, etc. And essentially a comfortable driver with good access to all the controls round about him will be more productive than a driver who's sitting in an uncomfortable cab who's having to grapple and wrestle to find all the controls. Going along with that, the access to information on the tractor's performance, and indeed the performance of the implement behind the tractor, is obviously important as well. And then the icing on the cake is to be able to take all that information on the work that we've done today, take it back to the farm office, analyse it by computer, and if necessary make corrective action for the work that we're going to be doing tomorrow. So productivity, comfort, and then we add into that government legislation driving tractor design, which would essentially revolve around, at the moment, the emissions legislation. And this is really about ensuring that the air that we all breathe as citizens of the world, if you like, is clean. And that's why we're now moving into stage 3A and moving forward to stage 3B for emissions legislation in the next few years.
What things are driving this new legislation?
Well, the objective of the legislation is clean air. Now, why is clean air important to all of us? Well, it could affect our health if we have nasty gases in the environment. Now, if we take nitrous oxide, or NOx, which is a byproduct of engine combustion, it can cause acid rain. It's a greenhouse gas. If we were subjected to long periods of a concentrated impact of NOx, it could cause visibility, breathing problems, etc. Now, in farm machinery, we are not the biggest pollutants by any means. You can imagine trucks, buses, passenger cars, which are used in urban areas, would be much worse, if you like, than what we are. But as trucks and buses and cars become cleaner, the onus is on us as farm machinery manufacturers to make sure that our machines are producing clean air as well. And essentially the government legislation, when we peel back all the red tape, is about making the air that we all breathe, even us as farm machinery people, much cleaner. And that's good for everybody. It's good for the environment, it's good for farmers, it's good for farmers' customers. It's just generally a good thing to be involved in.
And how is this legislation affecting the design of tractors like the one behind you?
Well, it's a challenge for the engineers, because to restrict the production of nitrous oxide in an engine, there are 2 choices. One is the selection that we've taken, which is to treat the gases in the exhaust stream, which means that we don't actually need to do anything to the engine. Or the alternative would be to reduce the engine temperature, the combustion temperature. And that's a massive challenge for engineers as additional components are required to cool the exhaust gases, recirculate the exhaust gases, etc. On our brand new 370 horsepower flagship tractor, the Massey Ferguson 8690, we've selected the technology that's widely used in truck and bus industries called SCR. That means selective catalytic reduction. Well, that's quite a mouthful, but how does it actually work in practice? Well, basically we set up the engine to be absolutely as efficient as possible and don't worry about the exhaust emissions at this stage. That means that we actually get improved fuel economy from the engine, because once the gases come into the exhaust stream, we're going to treat them with a substance very well known to farmers, which is urea. But it's not a fertilizer in this case, it's a fluid, a very controlled and regulated fluid, if you like, that we're going to inject into the exhaust system, and in a catalytic process convert those nitrous oxide gases, the NOx, into harmless nitrogen and water. And that's essentially what we're doing to make sure that the air coming out our exhaust pipes is clean and meets the regulations set down by both the UK and the European governments.
And what are the things about this new tractor make it stand out?
Well, following on from the discussion on electronics, we've got a link between the tractor engine and the transmission. We call that dynamic transmission management. It actually means that we're always operating the tractor in the most fuel efficient mode possible as we drive through the field. In addition to that, we've got a brand new cab on this tractor. It's what we call a 4-point cab. That means excellent visibility to the left, to the right, to the forward, to the rear. The driver sits in luxury, if you like, inside the cab, ready to do a full day's work. All the controls are very neatly arranged to his right-hand side or to his left-hand side as required, and he sits in complete control. In addition to that, the cab sits in a brand new suspension system that automatically follows the contours of the field. Again, more comfort means more productivity for the driver. We have a beefed up heavy duty version of the transmission that we already used in an existing tractor series, and the new engine management system that we already discussed. So it is a completely new tractor that uses technology that we already had, builds on that technology, beefs it up, and has introduced some important new innovations as well.
It's obviously a very big, powerful tractor, but how does it perform in terms of fuel consumption?
Well, using this new SCR system, which is the treatment of the exhaust gases after they leave the engine, that means that our engineers can set up the tractor engine to perfection, to be the most efficient and economic as possible, getting the right combustion temperature and turning all the diesel fuel into energy. That means that we're able to publicly publish a 5% fuel saving versus alternative emissions control technologies.
So could you tell me a little bit about your background in agriculture?
Oh, well, the usual one really, family farm, college, and I've got a brother who runs the farm, so I've always done contracting. And for years I've had 3-wheel irrigators doing fertiliser, and had seen these machines made in Holland when I had the visit to the factory. And about 3 years ago, looked like there was a good opportunity. Initially it was with the new regulations coming out with MVZs and stuff like that. But what's really overtaken everything recently is the price of fertiliser and the savings that farmers can make utilising their slurry better, basically.
Can you tell me a little bit about the philosophy behind the design and production of these particular machines?
Well, they started in the early 90s when in Holland made you have to inject slurry by law because it's such a small country and such a lot of slurry from the big pig industry they had. There was quite big environmental problems. So people naturally started by putting tankers behind tractors, etc., deep injecting and various different methods. And it was more pretty similar to how we've been. Though they were injecting it was in a out of sight, out of mind fashion. And then through the early 90s people came up with the idea of doing it via self-propelled and actually utilising the nutrient content of the slurry, which is then when the development really accelerated. At that point suddenly you need straight away to be able to program a rate into a machine, and whatever speed you're doing with the machine, put the required rate on, because you're using the slurry as a fertiliser, so it has to be accurate. So that came. Then gradually the injectors have improved, so you get a fuller utilisation of the nutrients from the injection.
Can you tell me a little bit more about the slurry injection business that you're currently doing?
Right, that's the interesting part of that really is you can replace inorganic fertiliser with slurry. And it's quite difficult to get farmers onto it. They have to change their whole philosophy about how they view slurry, whether it be pig or dairy. And they've got to go through, you've got to test the material to give you an idea about how much plant food's in there. The beauty about injecting is that it gives you an even spread right the way across the field. You know exactly how much plant food you're putting on. And you're really replacing inorganic fertiliser application. There's a lot of different ways of doing it. You can achieve an even spread with drop hoses and various other bits of equipment. But to really get slurry to work, you have to make a little slot in the ground. It doesn't matter. Sometimes, if it's nice and soft, you can get in. inch, 2 inches. With a disc injector we don't usually work any deeper than that, but when it's really hard, I suppose that's the other advantage with a Terrogator. They've got so much power pushing the injector in, it'll almost put it in a concrete road, I should think. And you just got you have to inject it to really get your best return from it.
And where would you see the future of Terrogator and slurry injection over the next few years?
I think it's got a very good future. I think we need a take-up of it because it's a message that the farmers can do something environmentally sensitive and make money at the same time. It's actually the farmer understanding that his slurry is worth an amount of money. At the moment, about £10 per cubic metre, which is about £45 per 1,000 gallons. So a machine like this holds £150 worth of NPK every time it goes out of the yard. So we can do the right thing but make money as well. So I think injection's got a very good future, and I think gradually through time what we'll see is that injection will progress to being done by contractors with self-propelled machines as it has on the continent, and as we've seen other operations in this country like forage harvesting, for instance.
What sort of savings do you feel you can make by moving to slurry injection as opposed to inorganic fertiliser?
I reckon at today's prices, roughly it costs a third of what inorganic fertiliser costs. Every £10,000 they spend, they'll be saving 20,000 quid on bought-in fertiliser. And that's only a year or 12 months ago. They would have been making... They're making a good saving, but not nearly as much as that. Probably as much as a quarter they'd save. But I mean, now it's just ridiculous the amount of money they can save. And the farm we're on now, he doesn't buy fertiliser. He probably buys a little bit just to top up on various areas we haven't got quite enough muck. But he'll inject everything bit of muck he's got and makes a huge saving.
Could you run us through the Terrogator system, maybe from filling through to cab?
Well, on this particular machine we have what we call a superload system, which uses a secondary pump to speed up filling. So that will pump at around 14 cubic metres a minute. So something like this, which is a 15 cubic metre, 3,300 gallon tank, will fill in just over a minute. Everything passes into the machine via a cutter. Why we do that, if we cut it coming into the tank, it would minimises any problems with the material going through the injector, because the injector has a distribution head on it that can be subject to blockage if you get the wrong material in it. So we make every effort to minimise the chance of that by processing the material before it goes in the tank. So it's come through the cutter, and when we inject, we set a rate into the computer in the cab, and regardless of speed it puts that rate on. It does that by varying the speed of the pump, because it's what we call a positive displacement pump, which is a twin rotor pump which always pumps exactly the same volume of material per rotation. So it does that by varying the rotation of the pump. On this particular machine we have a 9 cubic metre pump that passes through to the back of the machine and then into the injector, which has a distribution head to evenly distribute it across the width of the machine. One thing's worth pointing out, on a machine like this, with the positive displacement slurry system, the slurry goes where you want it to go. So with this machine, for instance, you can set it to recirculate, so it'll circulate the liquid around the tank to lift up any debris in the tank, or mix material, do whatever you like. Some people even will apply stubble turnits via the grassland type injector. They'll actually mix it in with the slurry as it goes into the tank and then inject it so the seed is sitting in the slot with the slurry.
One of the unique features it has on this machine is what they call dog walk, and all 4 wheels will go on a separate bit of ground, and even when you're top dressing cereals in the spring in poor conditions, you leave very little mark on the crop. They have to have a little bit of a not look at it for about a week, 10 days, because especially if it's a bit wet in the spring it'll look a bit scruffy, but once the crop gets hold of the fertiliser or the muck, it's off and you can't see where you've been at all.
And in terms of technology in the cab, into computer systems, etc., what have we got there?
We've got a touchscreen computer system that monitors the pump and every activity of the machine. It's quite important on a machine like this that has a 2-stage pumping system for filling, in that to enable the quick filling speed we need automation in the changeover of pumps, so the computer's ideally suited to do that. It also lessens driver fatigue, because one thing on machines now, you have a high capital value machine that needs to work a number of hours a day, so we need to reduce driver fatigue, which automated systems readily do.
Things seem to be going pretty well. How would you see your injection business developing over the next few years?
I've been doing it 3 years now. I actually have bought a blooming interrogator most of those years because I've had to increase my output. It's been growing about 50% a year at the moment, and the machine I've got now is just awesome. This is a really high output machine, and it's really looking to cater for my big arable customers. They want to see you cover the ground, and we're doing 60 to 80 acres a day this time of year, and so other times of year it's about volumes, and this machine does both. Just has huge pumps in it and wide injectors, and you can just get through the volume. Future is rosy, really. I think everybody wins. The environment wins because you're disposing of it in a controlled manner. Farmer wins because he's saving loads of money, and I win because I've got a profitable business. So there's no downside to injecting at all. And when I started, you always try to look for the downsides. And my accountant, who likes to cross every T and dot every I, went through it with a... She said, where is the downside? And I don't think there is one. It's everybody wins.
Thank you for watching this week's show. Be sure to tune in at the same time next week. Please contact us with any comments or thoughts on information@farmingsunday.co.uk.